I'm Stephanie Mitchell, 28 years old, and last summer I walked into my parents' Connecticut estate for our annual family reunion with anxiety buzzing through my veins. 6 months earlier, I'd abandoned my position at our family's prestigious law firm to pursue photography. The tension between us had been building, but I still hoped for reconciliation. I never expected to overhear my father's cold voice through the library door. In our eyes, she's already dead. The daughter we raised would never betray the family legacy like this. My mother's agreement shattered something inside me. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like button if you've ever had family turn their backs on you. Growing up as a Mitchell meant growing up with expectations. Our family name carried weight throughout Connecticut legal circles. My grandfather founded Mitchell and Associates in 1952, building it into one of the most respected firms in New England. My father took over in the early 90s, expanding its reach and reputation. The family legacy was clearly defined. Mitchells were attorneys, period. My childhood home reflected our status, a sprawling colonial on 3 acres in Greenwich, with manicured gardens and a view of the Long Island Sound. Family portraits lined the main hallway, each generation of Mitchell lawyers staring down with expressions of dignified achievement. My father added his portrait when he became managing partner. The empty space beside it was reserved for me. I followed the prescribed path without question initially. The right preparatory school, Yale undergraduate, then Yale Law, maintaining the family tradition. I graduated with honors, passed the bar on my first attempt, and joined Mitchell and Associates at 24. My father introduced me to clients with obvious pride, always mentioning my academic achievements and natural legal mind. The partners nodded approvingly whenever I walked into a room. On paper, I was the perfect Mitchell successor, but beneath the surface, a different passion had been growing since I was 16. Photography started as a hobby when my aunt gave me a camera for my birthday. Through the viewfinder, I found a world where perfection wasn't measured by grades or arguments won. I captured moments of raw emotion and beauty that legal briefs could never contain. While my parents thought I was studying for exams, I'd often be experimenting with lighting techniques or editing photos. During my second year at the firm, I met Marcus Reynolds at a charity function. He was photographing the event, and we struck up a conversation when he caught me admiring his equipment. Unlike anyone else in my circle, Marcus recognized something in my casual comments about photography. He asked to see my work, and his genuine enthusiasm gave me the confidence to show someone my private passion for the first time. "You have a natural eye," he told me, flipping through my portfolio. "These aren't amateur shots, Stephanie. Have you ever thought about doing this professionally?" I laughed it off, explaining my family situation. Marcus didn't push, but he did invite me to join him on weekend shoots, offering to help refine my technique. Those Saturdays and Sundays became islands of authenticity in my increasingly suffocating life. My parents discovered my hobby accidentally when my mother stopped by my apartment unannounced and found my living room transformed into a makeshift studio. I was photographing a local musician for his album cover, an unpaid project, but creatively fulfilling. "This is what you've been doing with your weekends?" she asked, eyebrows raised as she surveyed the lighting equipment. "It's fine to have hobbies, Stephanie, but you shouldn't let them distract you from your responsibilities at the firm." That night at dinner, she mentioned it to my father with forced casualness. "Stephanie's developed quite an interest in photography. Isn't that sweet?" My father barely looked up from his meal. "As long as it doesn't affect her billable hours." They dismissed it so completely that I became more determined to prove its value. I submitted pieces to local exhibitions under a pseudonym, not ready to have my work judged by my family name. When 3 of my photographs sold at a small gallery showing, I felt a validation no legal victory had ever given me. Meanwhile, my mental health deteriorated as I maintained my double life. Panic attacks became frequent, often striking in the bathroom between client meetings. I'd grip the sink, struggling to breathe, my reflection in the mirror growing unrecognizable. I was sleeping 3 to 4 hours most nights, surviving on caffeine and anxiety. The prestigious career that was supposed to fulfill me felt like a prison sentence. The breaking point came at my first significant exhibition. A gallery owner named Diana Mendez had seen my work and offered me space in her emerging artist showcase. The opening night, as I stood watching people engage with my photographs, a strange calm settled over me. Diana approached with a business card between her fingers. "The Weston Gallery in Soho wants to see your portfolio," she said quietly. "They're looking for new photographers for a feature exhibition next spring." That moment crystallized everything. The opportunity represented a genuine career path in photography, something I'd never allowed myself to seriously consider. But it would require a commitment I couldn't make while working 60-hour weeks at the firm. After a sleepless night, I walked into my father's office the following Monday and closed the door. "I need to talk to you about my future at Mitchell and Associates," I began. He looked up, likely expecting a discussion about partnership track. Instead, I told him I was leaving the firm to pursue photography professionally. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to cold anger. "This is absurd," he said. "You're throwing away everything we've built for you on a whim." "It's not a whim," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is something I've been passionate about for years." "Passionate?" he repeated, almost spitting the word. "Passion doesn't build a legacy, Stephanie. Commitment does. Sacrifice does." My mother, called in to talk sense into me, wasn't any more understanding. "You're having a quarter-life crisis," she said, pacing the office. "Take a vacation, see a therapist if you need to. But don't throw away your future over this hobby." I submitted my resignation that afternoon. As I cleared out my office, neither of my parents came to see me. By evening, my keycard access had been deactivated, and my profile removed from the firm's website. The swift erasure of my professional identity was clearly meant as a message. If I wasn't a Mitchell lawyer, I wasn't a Mitchell at all. The 6 months following my departure from Mitchell and Associates were simultaneously the most liberating and most difficult of my life. With my parents' silent treatment in full effect, I threw myself into building my photography career from scratch. The family name that had opened doors throughout my life now seemed to work against me, at least in Connecticut social circles where my parents held influence. My first professional break came through Marcus, who recommended me to a local magazine for a spread on urban renewal. The editor was reluctant initially, questioning my experience, but the photos spoke for themselves. Seeing my name in the publication credits felt more meaningful than any legal brief I'd ever filed. Financial reality hit hard and fast. My savings wouldn't sustain me indefinitely, and without access to my trust fund, which my parents controlled until my 30th birthday, I had to downsize dramatically. I sold my luxury condo in downtown Greenwich and moved to a one-bedroom apartment in Stamford that could double as a small studio space. The building had constant elevator problems and occasionally questionable plumbing, but it was mine, chosen without parental approval or expectations. The transition revealed which relationships in my life were genuine and which were connected to my family status. Many of my friends from law school and country club circles gradually stopped returning calls. Invitations to charity galas and social functions dried up. It was a painful process of discovery, but it cleared space for more authentic connections. Rachel Bennett entered my life during this period. A graphic designer who worked at the magazine that published my photos, she approached me about collaborating on a project for her portfolio. Unlike most people I'd known, Rachel was refreshingly direct. When I mentioned my family's situation, she didn't offer empty platitudes or uncomfortable silence. "Family legacy stuff is toxic," she said, adjusting the lighting setup in my makeshift studio. "My dad wanted me to take over his accounting firm so badly he didn't speak to me for 2 years when I went to art school instead. Now we have Sunday dinner together every week." Her story gave me hope that reconciliation might be possible given enough time. When the invitation to the annual Mitchell family reunion arrived in my mailbox in July, I saw it as an opportunity. My parents hadn't personally contacted me, but the fact that I was still included in family events seemed promising. "You should go," Rachel encouraged over coffee the week before the event. "Worst case scenario, You confirm they're still being unreasonable, and you leave. Best case, they've had time to adjust to your new path and are ready to make peace. Preparing for the party consumed me with anxiety. I changed outfits 7 times the morning of the reunion, trying to strike the right balance between the polished appearance my family expected and authenticity to my new life. I rehearsed potential conversations in the mirror, practicing responses to inevitable questions about when I was coming back to my senses. The drive to my parents' estate felt surreal. I'd made the journey countless times throughout my life, but never with such trepidation. As I turned onto the private road leading to their house, childhood memories flooded back: summer barbecues, holiday gatherings, my high school graduation party on the back lawn. The familiarity of it all made the current estrangement even more painful. Cars lined the circular driveway when I arrived: Audis, BMWs, and Mercedes, the standard vehicular uniform of upper-class Connecticut. I parked my 5-year-old Subaru, another downgrade from my previous lifestyle, at the far end, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the warm summer air. The family estate hadn't changed. The colonial-style mansion stood as imposing as ever, its white columns and perfect symmetry projecting stability and tradition. Manicured gardens surrounded the property, with not a flower out of place. Even as a child, I had found the perfections somewhat suffocating, though I wouldn't have articulated it that way then. My cousin Melissa spotted me first as I entered through the side garden. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise before she composed herself. "Stephanie," she said, air-kissing my cheek, "I didn't think you'd come." "Why wouldn't I?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She shrugged, glancing around nervously. "No reason. Just, you know how things have been." The awkwardness of that exchange set the tone for the next hour. Relatives greeted me with varying degrees of warmth and discomfort. Uncle Robert asked pointed questions about my photography phase, while Aunt Judith whispered something to my second cousin immediately after speaking with me. I caught fragments of conversations that stopped abruptly when I approached. My name had clearly been a topic of discussion before my arrival. Throughout it all, my parents were nowhere to be seen. They were typically the center of these gatherings, my father holding court by the bar, while my mother fluttered between guest clusters, ensuring everyone's enjoyment. Their absence from the main areas seemed deliberate, and the knot in my stomach tightened with each passing minute. After an hour of strained small talk and curious stares, I needed a moment alone. I slipped away from the party and headed toward the library, my childhood sanctuary in this house. The room had always been my favorite retreat during family gatherings, its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and leather armchairs, offering quiet comfort away from social demands. The heavy oak door of the library stood partially open, a sliver of warm light spilling into the hallway. I pushed it wider, expecting to find an empty room where I could collect my thoughts. Instead, I heard voices coming from the adjoining study, my father's private office. The connecting door between the two rooms was ajar, and though I couldn't see the occupants, their conversation carried clearly into the library. I recognized my father's voice immediately, the authoritative tone he used when making pronouncements at family gatherings. My mother's softer cadence followed. Then my Uncle William asked a question that froze me in place. "Where is Stephanie today? I haven't seen her around the firm lately." There was a pointed silence before my father responded, his voice tight with controlled anger. "She's decided photography is more important than the family legacy we've built over 3 generations." "Oh, Richard," my Aunt Patricia sighed. "She's young. Surely this is just a phase she's going through." My mother's laugh held no warmth. "We thought so initially. It's been 6 months now with no sign of her coming to her senses." "Such a waste," my father continued. "Top of her class at Yale, natural talent in the courtroom, connections we've spent decades cultivating, all thrown away for what? Taking pictures anyone with an iPhone could manage." I stood motionless, my hand still on the library door. I should have left then, walked out and rejoined the party. But something kept me rooted to the spot. Perhaps a masochistic need to hear how they truly felt without the veneer of civility. "Have you tried talking to her?" Uncle William asked. "Explaining what's at stake?" "We've tried reasoning with her," my mother replied. She won't listen. So stubborn, just like her grandfather. And the succession plan for the firm? My aunt inquired. Wasn't she being groomed to take over eventually? My father's chair creaked. I could picture him leaning forward, elbows on the desk, as he often did when discussing serious matters. We're announcing Alexander as junior partner next month, he said, referring to my cousin who had joined the firm 2 years after me. He's shown the commitment to Mitchell and Associates that our daughter lacked. Does Stephanie know? Uncle William asked. In our eyes, she's already dead, my father stated flatly. The daughter we raised would never betray the family legacy like this. Richard and I have updated our will, my mother added. If she continues down this path, there's no place for her in the Mitchell estate planning. The words hit me like physical blows. Each syllable pierced through the carefully maintained hope I'd nurtured that time would heal our rift. My throat constricted as I struggled to breathe normally, the room suddenly spinning around me. That seems harsh, my aunt murmured, though her tone suggested she wasn't particularly surprised. It's necessary, my father countered. The firm is our legacy. If Stephanie doesn't value that, she doesn't value us. A wave of nausea washed over me as the full import of their words sank in. Dead to them, written out of the will, replaced by my cousin, all because I had chosen to follow my passion rather than their predetermined path. Without conscious decision, I pushed the connecting door open fully. 4 startled faces turned toward me. My parents, Uncle William, and Aunt Patricia, seated around my father's desk with drinks in hand. How long have you been standing there? My mother asked, color draining from her face. Long enough, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. Long enough to hear that I'm dead to you. My father didn't flinch. His expression hardened as he set his scotch glass down with deliberate precision. Eavesdropping now, Stephanie? I don't recall raising you to lurk in doorways. And I don't recall being raised to be disowned for following my passion. I shot back, anger finally breaking through the shock. No one has disowned you, my mother said, though her eyes didn't meet mine. You're being dramatic. Am I? In our eyes, she's already dead. Those were your exact words, weren't they, Dad? Uncle William and Aunt Patricia exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly wishing to be anywhere but in the middle of this confrontation. Perhaps we should give you some privacy, Uncle William suggested, rising from his chair. No need, my father said coldly. Stephanie was just leaving. I deserve an explanation, I insisted, stepping further into the room. 6 months of silence, and now I find out you're writing me out of your will and announcing Alex as junior partner? Were you ever going to tell me to my face? What would be the point? My father asked. You made your choice when you walked away from the firm. I walked away from a career that was making me miserable, not from being your daughter. My mother stood, smoothing her perfectly tailored dress. You know how important the firm is to this family, to your father. You chose to break his heart. The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. This isn't about broken hearts. It's about control. You can't stand that I found success doing something that wasn't in your master plan. Success? My father's voice dripped with disdain. Living in that apartment? Scraping by on photography gigs? That's what you call success? I call happiness success, I replied. Something I never had at Mitchell and Associates. My father stood now too, his imposing height emphasized by the raised platform of his office area. You have a choice to make, Stephanie. Come back to the firm where you belong, or accept the consequences of your decision. That's your ultimatum? Abandon my passion or be dead to you? Your so-called passion, my mother interjected, is a childish rebellion. You're breaking your father's heart for a hobby. It's not a hobby, it's my career. One I'm building on talent, rather than a family name. My father's laugh was cold. Talent? Do you know how many failed photographers there are in this world? You had everything at the firm. Respect, security, a future. And you threw it away on a pipe dream that will end in failure. The word failure hung in the air between us, and in that moment, something inside me broke permanently. The last thread of hope that they might eventually understand or accept my choices snapped. I'd rather fail at something I love than succeed at something that makes me miserable, I said quietly. But that's something you would never understand. I turned to leave, my legs somehow carrying me despite feeling like they might collapse. At the door, I paused for a final look at my parents, these strangers wearing familiar faces. Enjoy your party. Don't worry about introducing me to anyone. After all, it's hard to introduce a dead daughter. I pushed through the gathered guests in the main hall, ignoring the curious stares and whispered comments. Tears blurred my vision as I rushed toward the front door, nearly colliding with Rachel, who had just arrived to pick me up as we'd arranged. "Whoa! What happened?" she asked, steadying me by the shoulders. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. She took one look at my face and steered me toward her car, away from the prying eyes of my family. As we drove away from the estate, I watched the house recede in the side mirror until it disappeared around a bend. It felt symbolic somehow, the physical manifestation of the emotional distance that now existed between me and my parents. The days following the family reunion blurred together in a haze of tears and numbness. Rachel stayed with me that first night, making up the sofa in my small apartment and ordering takeout that I couldn't eat. I replayed the conversation in the study countless times, each recollection bringing fresh waves of pain and anger. "They actually said you were dead to them?" Rachel asked, her expression a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Who says that about their child?" "The illustrious Mitchells, apparently," I replied, attempting humor that fell flat even to my own ears. The initial shock gave way to a depression that settled over me like a heavy blanket. I canceled photography appointments, ignored emails, and spent days in unwashed pajamas staring at the ceiling. Rachel checked in daily, sometimes physically appearing at my door with groceries and concerned glances. 2 weeks after the party, the financial reality of my situation became impossible to ignore. An official letter arrived from my parents' attorney, informing me that my access to the Mitchell Family Trust had been formally revoked. The trust had been my safety net, the thing that had made pursuing photography seem financially feasible. Now it was gone. That same week, I discovered another consequence of my parents' rejection. A potential client who had seemed enthusiastic about hiring me for their corporate event suddenly went cold. When I pressed for an explanation, she reluctantly admitted she'd been advised against working with me. "Someone said you were unreliable," she explained awkwardly, "that you abandoned professional commitments without notice." It didn't take much detective work to trace the rumor back to my parents' social circle. They weren't just cutting me off financially, they were actively sabotaging my new career. The pattern continued. Former colleagues from the legal world stopped returning texts. Invitations to industry events where I might make photography contacts mysteriously disappeared. One gallery owner, who had expressed interest in my work, suddenly found my style not quite right for his space after a charity lunch with my mother. As summer turned to fall, the isolation deepened. Social media became a form of self-torture as I scrolled through photos of family gatherings I was no longer invited to. My cousin Lucy's engagement party, the annual Mitchell Thanksgiving Planning Committee, my parents beaming at the firm's anniversary celebration with my cousin Alexander prominently featured. The approaching holiday season loomed like a specter. For 28 years, I'd spent Thanksgiving and Christmas at the family estate. Now, those traditions were closed to me, the empty calendar slots a stark reminder of all I'd lost. In a moment of weakness, I attempted reconciliation. I sent heartfelt letters to both parents, explaining my passion for photography, while emphasizing that I still wanted to be part of the family. The letters were returned unopened. I tried calling the house, only to be politely informed by their housekeeper that Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell were not available to speak with me. As rejection piled upon rejection, my resentment grew. I began obsessively documenting every slight, real or perceived, building a case file of grievances against my parents. Rachel grew concerned about my fixation. "They're taking up too much real estate in your head," she told me one evening, as I ranted about seeing my mother quoted in a Society page article about supporting children's authentic paths. The hypocrisy nearly sending me over the edge. "I can't just pretend none of this is happening," I argued. "No, but you can choose how much power it has over you. Your photography is suffering. When was the last time you actually picked up your camera? She was right. The passion that had driven me to leave the law firm had been overshadowed by bitterness. My creative work, when I managed to do any, had grown dark and unfocused, lacking the vision and purpose that had once defined it. By December, my financial situation reached crisis point. Unable to pay rent, I pawned some of my camera equipment, specialized lenses I'd saved for months to purchase. The sacrifice felt symbolic of everything falling apart around me. On a particularly cold night, sitting in my apartment with the heat turned low to save on utilities, I hit rock bottom. A holiday card addressed to the Mitchell family had arrived that morning, the generic greeting a painful reminder that I was no longer considered part of that unit. For a brief, terrible moment, I considered giving up completely, returning to my parents with an apology, begging for my position at the firm back, surrendering to their vision of who I should be. I fell asleep on the sofa that night, emotionally exhausted, and dreamed of returning to the firm. In the dream, I wore perfectly tailored suits again, carried an expensive briefcase, and had a corner office with my name on the door. Everyone smiled approvingly as I walked through the halls. My parents introduced me proudly at events. Everything looked perfect on the surface, but in the dream, I couldn't speak. Whenever I tried to form words, nothing came out. I moved through the perfectly constructed life like a ghost, seen but not heard, present but not alive. I woke up gasping, the metaphor all too clear. Morning light streamed through my apartment windows, illuminating dust particles floating in the air. I sat up on the couch, still wearing yesterday's clothes, the dream lingering in my consciousness. The silent, hollow version of myself at the law firm felt more like a premonition than a nightmare, a glimpse of what surrendering to my parents' demands would actually mean. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Brunch? I'm bringing someone you should meet." An hour later, showered but still emotionally raw, I sat across from Rachel and a stylish woman in her 50s at our favorite diner. Diana Mendez had a presence that commanded attention. Silver-streaked black hair, cut in a sharp bob, statement jewelry, and penetrating dark eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they landed on. "Diana owns the Mendez Gallery in Chelsea," Rachel explained. "I showed her your portfolio." I shot Rachel an annoyed look. I wasn't ready to have my work judged in my current state, but Diana leaned forward before I could object. "Your composition is exceptional," she said without preamble. "Your series on urban solitude particularly. There's genuine emotion there, not just technical skill." "Thank you," I replied, caught off guard by the direct praise. "I'm curating a new exhibition," she continued. "The theme is identity and belonging, exploring how people define themselves within or against family, culture, community. Your aesthetic would fit perfectly." "I haven't been shooting much lately," I admitted. Diana nodded as if she'd expected this answer. "Rachel mentioned you're going through something personal. Sometimes the most powerful art comes from our deepest wounds." The conversation shifted to the technical details of her gallery and exhibition, but a spark had been ignited inside me. For the first time in months, I felt the familiar pull of creative possibility. As Diana described her vision for the exhibition, an idea began forming in my mind, using photography to process my own experience of family rejection. After Diana left, Rachel watched me expectantly. "Well, I think I have a concept," I said slowly. "A photo essay series about people who've been disowned by their families. Not just my story, but others who've gone through similar experiences." The idea took shape rapidly over the following days. I created an online call-out for subjects willing to share their stories of family estrangement. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of emails from people across the city who had been rejected by parents, siblings, and extended family for reasons ranging from sexuality and religion to career choices and marriages their families didn't approve of. I set up my first interview with James, a 35-year-old teacher whose Southern Baptist family had cut ties when he came out as gay 10 years earlier. As he spoke about his experience, I photographed him, not posed studio shots, but candid images capturing the subtle expressions that crossed his face as he recounted both the pain of rejection and the freedom of living authentically. The hardest part wasn't the actual disowning, he told me, eyes fixed on a point in the distance. It was realizing that their love had always been conditional. His words resonated so deeply that I had to pause, ostensibly to adjust my camera while actually blinking back tears. I recognized that same conditional love in my own parents, the affection and pride that had always depended on my adherence to their expectations. More subjects followed. Elena, whose traditional Greek family stopped speaking to her when she married outside her culture. Marcus, disowned for choosing music over the family construction business. Sarah, whose parents cut her off for refusing an arranged marriage. Each person shared not only their story of rejection, but also how they had rebuilt their sense of self and belonging afterward. The project became therapeutic, not just for my subjects, but for me as well. In documenting their resilience, I found myself healing. Behind the camera, I reclaimed my identity as a photographer while processing my grief through a creative lens. The portraits were intimate and powerful, each image capturing both vulnerability and strength. Diana visited my apartment turned studio to review the developing collection. She moved silently from one portrait to another, occasionally nodding or making notes. "These are exceptional, Stephanie," she finally said. "You're not just documenting subjects, you're telling a story about human resilience. I want to feature the complete series when it's ready." Rachel helped me apply for a small arts grant to support the project, which allowed me to upgrade some of the equipment I'd been forced to sell. I worked multiple side jobs, event photography, headshots, even waiting tables at a cafe near my apartment, to keep myself financially afloat, while pouring my creative energy into the Disowned series. The work consumed me, but in a healthy way, unlike the obsessive resentment that had dominated previous months. I was creating something meaningful from my pain instead of being crushed by it. Each portrait session reinforced that I wasn't alone in my experience, that family rejection was something many people survived and eventually transcended. A breakthrough came when I realized the series needed one more subject: me. Setting up my camera with a remote trigger, I created a self-portrait, not a conventional headshot, but an image of myself surrounded by law books and legal pads, with a camera clutched to my chest like a shield. The vulnerability of turning the lens on myself completed the narrative arc of the collection. 6 months after that fateful family reunion, Rachel, Diana, and I stood in my small apartment reviewing the completed series. 20 portraits hung on makeshift display boards, the final sequence telling a powerful story of rejection and reclamation. "This isn't just good, Stephanie," Diana said. Her usual brisk tone softened with genuine admiration. "This is important work. The Weston Gallery has an opening in their schedule next month, due to an artist cancellation. I've already spoken with the director. He wants to feature Disowned as a full exhibition." The news was so unexpected that I couldn't speak for a moment. The Weston Gallery was one of the most prestigious contemporary photography spaces in the city, the kind of venue that could launch a serious career. "Are you serious?" I finally managed. Diana smiled. "Completely. Your timing is perfect. They're looking for fresh perspectives, and this series offers something genuinely new. The emotional authenticity comes through in every image." As they left that evening, Rachel hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "You've turned something devastating into something beautiful." Alone in my apartment, I looked at the portrait collection that had emerged from the darkest period of my life. Each image reflected back a piece of my own experience, transformed into art that might help others feel less alone in similar situations. For the first time since walking out of my parents' house, I felt completely certain I'd made the right choice. The weeks leading up to the Weston Gallery opening were a whirlwind of activity. Diana handled the business aspects while I focused on the final preparations of the artwork. Each photograph needed to be perfectly printed, mounted, and framed, a process I insisted on overseeing personally. These weren't just images. They were stories entrusted to me by people who had shared their most vulnerable experiences. The gallery space exceeded my expectations. High ceilings, pristine white walls, and strategic lighting created an environment where each portrait commanded attention. Walking through the empty gallery the day before opening, watching the installation team hanging my work, felt surreal, like stepping into a dream I hadn't allowed myself to fully imagine. "We need your approval on the placement," the gallery director said, gesturing to the entrance wall where my self-portrait hung. Diana suggested this as the anchor piece. Seeing my own face as the introduction to the exhibition created a lump in my throat. The image captured exactly what I'd hoped: the tension between my legal background and photographic passion, the vulnerability and determination in my expression. It was the most honest portrait I'd ever created. "It's perfect," I confirmed. Media interest in the exhibition started small but grew rapidly. A local arts blog published a preview piece, which caught the attention of a culture writer at the Village Voice. Soon I was sitting for my first formal interview as an artist. "What inspired Disowned?" the journalist asked, recorder running between us as we sat in the quiet gallery surrounded by my photographs. I hesitated briefly before deciding on complete honesty. My parents said I was dead to them when I left my law career to pursue photography. This exhibition grew from that experience and from meeting others with similar stories of family rejection. The resulting article was thoughtful and compelling, highlighting both the personal story behind the collection and its artistic merits. It concluded with a line that stuck with me: "Mitchell's Disowned transforms private pain into universal connection, inviting viewers to reconsider how we define family, belonging, and ultimately, ourselves." The piece generated significant attention. My Instagram followers jumped from a few hundred to several thousand overnight. Gallery attendance for the opening was projected to be double the usual numbers. Diana called with news that 3 prominent collectors had expressed interest in purchasing pieces from the series. "This is just the beginning," she assured me. "I've been in this business 30 years, Stephanie. I know when something is special." Financial stability returned gradually as sales from the exhibition materialized. I moved from my cramped apartment to a modest but comfortable studio space in Brooklyn that could function as both living quarters and a professional workspace. For the first time since leaving the law firm, I felt secure enough to focus entirely on my photography without the constant anxiety about making rent. The exhibition opening night exceeded all expectations. The gallery was packed, with attendees spilling onto the sidewalk. I spotted several recognized names from the art world circulating through the crowd. Diana introduced me to collectors, curators, and gallery owners, many of whom handed me business cards with invitations to discuss future projects. More meaningful than the professional connections were the conversations with ordinary visitors moved by the exhibition. People approached me throughout the evening to share their own stories of family conflict and estrangement, many with tears in their eyes. "I thought I was the only one," a woman in her 60s told me, squeezing my hand. "I haven't spoken to my daughter in 12 years because she married someone I disapproved of. After seeing your work, I'm going to call her tomorrow." These interactions reinforced that the exhibition was achieving something beyond career advancement. It was creating space for healing and connection around a usually private form of grief. As my professional circle expanded, I began building what Rachel called my chosen family, a network of supportive friends, fellow artists, and mentors who celebrated rather than constrained my authentic self. I started teaching weekend photography workshops for at-risk youth, finding unexpected fulfillment in helping young people express themselves through visual storytelling. Diana continued opening doors, introducing me to influential figures in the art world and helping me navigate the business aspects of a creative career. When she suggested I submit the Disowned series to the Emerging Vision Photography competition, I initially hesitated, intimidated by the prestigious national platform. "They received thousands of entries," I pointed out, "and yours will stand out," she replied with characteristic certainty. "Trust me on this." The submission process was rigorous. Artist statements, technical specifications, and extensive biography requirements. I worked late into several nights preparing the materials, trying not to fixate on the long odds of success. 3 months after my exhibition opening, I received the email notification that Disowned had made the finalist list for the competition. I read the message 4 times in disbelief before calling Rachel, who screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. The following week brought even more unexpected news. The competition organizers called personally to inform me I'd won in the Emerging Artist category. The prize included a significant cash award, publication in their annual anthology, and an invitation to speak at their conference in Chicago. "We were particularly moved by the emotional depth of your series," the program director explained. "The technical skill is evident, but it's the humanity in these portraits that set them apart." The day after the announcement, I received a call from a television producer at a national morning show. "We'd like to feature you and your work on our Artist to Watch segment," she explained. "Your story of leaving law to pursue photography, combined with the powerful theme of your winning series, is exactly the kind of inspiring content our viewers appreciate." The prospect of discussing my family's situation on national television was terrifying. I'd been relatively protected in the art world bubble, where personal narrative was valued and respected. Mass media exposure felt different, more vulnerable, and potentially exploitative. After consulting with Diana and Rachel, I decided to proceed with careful boundaries around what I would discuss. The producer was understanding, assuring me the focus would remain primarily on the artwork itself, with my personal journey as context rather than spectacle. As the interview date approached, I couldn't help wondering if my parents might see the segment. Would seeing their daughter recognized for the very pursuit they had dismissed affect them at all? The thought created a confusing mixture of emotions, hope for recognition alongside anger that I still craved their approval at all. The night before the television appearance, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, practicing responses to potential questions, trying to find the balance between honesty and dignity. Despite everything that had happened, I didn't want to publicly vilify my parents. Yet I couldn't tell my story without acknowledging the rejection that had catalyzed my most significant work. "Just be authentic," Rachel advised during our final prep call. "That's what made your photography powerful, and that's what will make your interview meaningful." I fell asleep that night, with her words echoing in my mind, a strange calm settling over me. Whatever happened on camera tomorrow, I had already survived the worst rejection possible. I had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain by standing in my truth. The television studio buzzed with activity as makeup artists and production assistants prepared for the morning broadcast. I sat in a swivel chair, trying not to fidget as a woman applied powder to reduce shine on my forehead. Behind her, monitors displayed the anchors discussing the day's headlines. My segment was scheduled for the second half hour, a 5-minute feature on my photography and award. 2 minutes, a producer announced, guiding me to a set designed to look like a comfortable living room. 3 of my photographs from the Disowned series had been mounted on easels nearby, including my self-portrait. The host, Jessica Winters, greeted me warmly. "Nervous?" she asked, noticing my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "Terrified," I admitted. She smiled. "Just forget about the cameras and talk to me. Your work is extraordinary. That will come through." The red light on the camera illuminated, and suddenly we were live to millions of viewers. Jessica introduced the segment with a brief overview of the Emerging Vision Award and my winning series. "Stephanie Mitchell joins us today to discuss her powerful photographic exploration of family estrangement," she began. "Stephanie, what inspired this deeply personal project?" Taking a deep breath, I shared my story, leaving the family law firm, my parents' rejection, and how the experience led me to connect with others who had been disowned by their families. Each portrait represents someone who made a choice to live authentically, even when it cost them their family relationships, I explained, gesturing toward the photographs. "The technical skill is evident," Jessica noted, "but there's an emotional quality to these images that really resonates. How did you capture that vulnerability in your subject?" "I shared my own story with them first," I replied. "When people know you understand their pain firsthand, they're willing to be more open." Many said the photo sessions felt therapeutic, finally being seen and validated in an experience that's often suffered in silence. The conversation flowed naturally, covering my artistic process, the exhibition, and the unexpected connections formed through the project. As we neared the end of the segment, Jessica read a message that had apparently come in during our discussion. "We've received this comment from a viewer named Megan in Connecticut," she said. "Your story mirrors my sister's experience. Our parents haven't spoken to her in years because she chose a different career path. Your courage gives me hope for reconciliation in my own family." The mention of Connecticut and the similarity to my situation caught me off guard. I didn't have a sister named Megan, but the coincidence felt significant. "What would you say to Megan and others in similar situations?" Jessica asked. I looked directly into the camera. "I'd say that authentic living is worth the cost, painful as it may be, and that finding your chosen family, people who love you for who you truly are, not for fulfilling their expectations, can heal even the deepest wounds of rejection." The segment ended, the red light blinked off, and Jessica thanked me warmly. "Powerful stuff," she said. "You've probably helped a lot of people today." As I was removing my microphone, a production assistant approached with a note. "Someone called the studio asking to speak with you." She was quite insistent. She handed me a slip of paper with a phone number. I stepped outside the studio to make the call, curiosity overcoming my usual caution with unknown numbers. A female voice answered immediately. "Stephanie? It's Megan." "I'm sorry, do I know you?" I asked, confused. "Megan Mitchell. Your cousin, Uncle Richard and Aunt Catherine's daughter." My breath caught. Cousin Megan was 7 years younger than me. We'd never been particularly close, but I remembered her as a quiet, thoughtful girl who often had her nose in a book at family gatherings. "The message on the show was from you?" "Yes," she confirmed. "I've been trying to figure out how to contact you for months, but everyone in the family acts like you've disappeared. When I saw the promos for your interview, I knew it was my chance." We arranged to meet at a cafe halfway between her college campus and my apartment. 2 hours later, I sat across from her, struck by how adult she looked compared to my last memory of her as a teenager. "They saw it," she said without preamble. "Your interview. Mom and Dad were watching the morning show over breakfast when your segment came on. They called your parents immediately." My stomach tightened. "How did they react?" "They're furious," Megan replied frankly. "Not just about the interview, but about the whole exhibition. Apparently, it's become quite talked about in their social circles. Someone they know attended your opening and recognized you." I had expected this possibility, but hearing confirmation still stung. "Are they planning to contact me?" Megan shook her head. "Not that I know of, but that's not why I reached out." She leaned forward. "Your exhibition. I want to see it. And I need to know if you're okay. What they did to you was wrong, Stephanie." Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected emotion rising at this small act of family solidarity. "I'm okay," I managed. "Better than okay, actually." We spent the next hour talking more openly than we ever had as children. Megan confessed her own doubts about the family expectation that she too would join the law firm after graduation. My experience had affected her deeply, making her question whether she wanted to follow the prescribed path. "You're not the only one reaching out," she told me. "Some of the cousins have started a group text without the parents. There's a divide forming between the generations about how you were treated." The knowledge that my absence had created ripples through the family was both satisfying and sad. I hadn't wanted to become a cautionary tale or a rebel symbol. I'd simply wanted to live my own life. Over the following weeks, more family members made clandestine contact. Second cousins, a young uncle, even my mother's sister calling furtively during her lunch break. Each expressed some combination of support and curiosity, many admitting they disagreed with how my parents had handled the situation, but had been unwilling to challenge the family patriarchs directly. The International Photography Exhibition Diana had submitted my work to send notification of my acceptance with a formal invitation to the opening gala in their Manhattan venue. The recognition represented another significant step forward in my career, placing my work alongside renowned photographers I had studied and admired. I invited Rachel and my growing circle of friends to attend the gala with me, grateful for their unwavering support throughout my journey. The evening of the event, I wore a deep blue gown that made me feel both powerful and authentically myself. Nothing like the conservative attire that had been my uniform in my previous life. The exhibition space was magnificent, the crowd impressive. Critics, collectors, and artists circulated through the gallery, champagne glasses in hand as they discussed the displayed works. My disowned series occupied a prominent wall, drawing consistent crowds throughout the evening. I was deep in conversation with the exhibition curator when Rachel appeared at my elbow, her expression tense. "Don't freak out," she murmured, "but your parents just walked in." My head snapped up, scanning the room until I spotted them near the entrance. My father in his customary dark suit, my mother elegant in cream, both looking distinctly uncomfortable amid the artistic crowd. They hadn't seen me yet, but were studying the exhibition catalog with furrowed brows. "What should I do?" I whispered to Rachel. "Whatever feels right," she replied, squeezing my arm. "I'm right here." Before I could decide on a course of action, the gallery fell quiet as the director stepped onto a small platform for the awards presentation. I was called up to receive recognition for my series. Applause filling the room as I accepted the elegant crystal trophy. When I looked out at the audience, my parents were staring directly at me. My father's expression inscrutable. My mother's face a complicated mixture of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. I completed my brief acceptance speech without acknowledging their presence, uncertain whether they had come to support or criticize. As guests resumed mingling, I found myself moving almost automatically through the crowd toward my parents. We met in a relatively quiet corner of the gallery, the three of us forming a tense triangle. "Congratulations," my father said stiffly. "Your cousin Megan was quite insistent that we should see your work in person, so that explained their presence. Not a voluntary olive branch, but family pressure." "I'm surprised you came," I replied honestly. "We're still your parents, Stephanie," my mother said, a note of accusation in her voice. "Despite how you've portrayed us to the world." "I haven't used your names or images," I pointed out. "The story I've told is mine to tell." My father's jaw tightened. "You've aired private family matters in a very public way. Do you have any idea how this has affected us socially? Our friends, our colleagues, everyone's seen this exhibition." "That wasn't my intention," I said. "The work isn't about exposing you. It's about healing from rejection." "Rejection?" My mother's voice rose slightly before she controlled it. "We gave you everything. The best education, opportunities most people can only dream of." "Everything except the freedom to choose my own path?" I interrupted. Other guests were beginning to notice our tense exchange. Rachel hovered protectively nearby, and I could see Diana watching with concern from across the room. "This isn't the place for this conversation," my father stated. "Then where is the place?" I asked. "You've refused my calls, returned my letters. You told me I was dead to you." My mother flinched slightly at the direct reference. "You're being dramatic again." "No," I said firmly. "I'm being honest. Something our family has never been good at." My father's expression darkened. "If honesty is what you want, fine. I think what you're doing is self-indulgent and childish. Taking pretty pictures instead of contributing something meaningful to society." "Like what? Helping wealthy corporations navigate tax loopholes?" The words escaped before I could temper them. His face flushed with anger. "You have no appreciation for everything we've built, everything we wanted for you." "What you wanted for me was never about me," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "It was about your legacy, your reputation, your plans." A small crowd had definitely formed now, people pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. This confrontation was everything I'd both feared and fantasized about for months. "We should go," my mother said to my father, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of our dispute. "Just tell me one thing," I said, stopping them before they could retreat. "Did you ever consider that my happiness might be more important than your expectations?" My father's expression remained hard, but my mother's eyes flickered with something that might have been doubt. For a brief moment, I thought she might actually engage with the question, might acknowledge some sliver of understanding. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and took my father's arm. "Your choices have consequences, Stephanie. You can't blame us for that." They turned to leave, my father rigid with anger, my mother casting one last complex look over her shoulder. I stood rooted to the spot, a storm of emotions making it impossible to move or speak. Rachel appeared at my side immediately. "Are you okay?" The question broke through my paralysis. "Actually, yes," I realized, somewhat surprised by the truth of it. "For the first time, I think I really am." Later that night, surrounded by friends celebrating my award in a crowded downtown restaurant, I found myself feeling lighter despite the difficult encounter. The confrontation had lacked the resolution I might have hoped for, but it had provided something perhaps more valuable: confirmation that I no longer needed my parents' approval to feel complete. "To Stephanie," Diana toasted, raising her glass, "who turned rejection into art and pain into purpose." As glasses clinked around the table, I realized I had finally, truly chosen myself over the weight of family expectations. Whatever happened with my parents going forward, reconciliation or continued estrangement, I would face it from a position of strength and self-acceptance rather than desperate need for validation. The choice had cost me my family of origin, but it had given me something more precious: the freedom to build a life that actually belonged to me. 1 year after the gallery confrontation, I stood in the center of my newly opened photography studio in Brooklyn, hardly recognizing my own life. The spacious converted warehouse featured high ceilings, abundant natural light, and enough room for both professional shoots and small exhibitions. The renovation had consumed 4 months of careful planning and work, transforming the raw industrial space into a functional creative environment that reflected my aesthetic. "It's perfect," Rachel declared, walking through the main area where my equipment was arranged for the day's first client. From lawyer to award-winning photographer, with her own studio in under 2 years. "Not too shabby, Mitchell." The journey hadn't been as simple as her summary suggested. The past year had brought tremendous professional growth alongside continued personal challenges. The Disowned series had opened doors throughout the photography world, leading to commissioned work for major magazines, speaking engagements at universities, and a waiting list of portrait clients. Financial independence had been hard-won through relentless work and careful management of the opportunities that came my way. I'd developed a reputation for emotional depth in my commercial photography, bringing the same authentic approach to paid assignments that had distinguished my personal work. Beyond the commercial success, I'd found unexpected fulfillment in teaching. My weekend workshops for teenagers from underserved communities had grown into a structured program sponsored by a local arts foundation. Watching young people discover their voice through photography reminded me of my own early passion and reinforced the value of the path I'd chosen. "The first students will be here in an hour," I reminded Rachel, adjusting the lighting setup for the day's youth workshop. "Can you help me set up the digital workstations?" As we prepared the space, my phone buzzed with a notification. The mail carrier had delivered a package requiring signature, unusual, since most of my professional materials were sent directly to the studio. I jogged downstairs to retrieve it, puzzled by the lack of return address on the oversized envelope. Back in the studio, I slid open the package to find a formal letter on heavy cream stationery, along with a thinner, hand-addressed envelope. "What is it?" Rachel asked, noting my sudden stillness. "It's from my mother," I said, staring at the familiar handwriting on the inner envelope. "The outer letter is from their lawyer." The attorney's letter was brief and formal, explaining that Catherine Mitchell wished to establish communication and requesting a response at my convenience. The personal note inside was even shorter. "Stephanie, I would like to meet with you if you're willing. There are things that need to be said in person. Mother." No apology, no warmth, just a straightforward request. Yet from my mother, even this represented a significant departure from the silence of the past 2 years. "Are you going to respond?" Rachel asked after I showed her both notes. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to ignore it like they ignored my attempts at reconciliation. Another part is curious. Over lunch, Rachel and I discussed the potential meeting and what boundaries I would need to establish. My life had achieved a balance I was reluctant to disrupt with family drama, yet the possibility of some resolution, even an imperfect one, held undeniable appeal. Whatever you decide, just be clear about what you need from the interaction, Rachel advised. Don't let them pull you back into old patterns. After careful consideration, I responded to my mother's note with a suggestion to meet at a neutral cafe the following week. The location was deliberate, public enough to discourage dramatic scenes, yet quiet enough for a private conversation. When the day arrived, I dressed carefully in clothes that represented my current self, professional but artistic, neither apologetically casual nor trying to meet my mother's conservative standards. I arrived early, selecting a corner table that allowed me to watch the entrance. My mother appeared precisely on time, as punctual as always. She wore a tailored dress in soft blue, more relaxed than her usual formal attire, but still impeccably put together. For a moment, she stood in the doorway, scanning the room until our eyes met. A flicker of something crossed her face, relief perhaps, or nervousness, before she composed herself and walked toward my table. "Stephanie," she greeted me, the slight tremor in her voice betraying emotion her expression concealed. "Mother," I replied, standing briefly as she took the seat across from me. An awkward silence fell as the server brought coffee. My mother stirred her cup methodically, the familiar gesture transporting me momentarily back to countless breakfasts at the family table. "You're looking well," she finally said. "Your father and I saw the feature about your studio in the Times, so they'd been keeping tabs on me." The knowledge stirred complicated emotions, resentment that they'd monitored my life from afar rather than participating in it, alongside a reluctant satisfaction that they'd noticed my success. "Why did you want to meet?" I asked directly, unwilling to engage in small talk that would allow us to avoid the real issues between us. My mother set down her spoon with deliberate care. "The family hasn't been the same since you left." "I didn't leave the family," I corrected. "I left the firm. You and Dad were the ones who decided that meant I was no longer your daughter." She flinched slightly. Things were said in anger that perhaps went too far. It wasn't exactly an apology, but from Catherine Mitchell, it represented a significant concession. "Your exhibition," she continued, "and the interviews you've done, they've made quite an impression in certain circles." "That wasn't my intention," I said, echoing my statement from the gallery confrontation. "My work wasn't about exposing the family." "I know that now," she admitted. "I've seen the complete series. Megan took me to the gallery showing last month." This surprised me. "You went to see the exhibition?" She nodded. It was illuminating to see how others have experienced similar situations, and to see your self-portrait. She hesitated. "You're very talented, Stephanie. I never really looked at your photography before." The acknowledgement, small as it was, affected me more than I wanted to admit. A lifetime of seeking parental approval doesn't disappear overnight, even when you've built a life beyond it. "Thank you," I said simply. She reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope. "This isn't why I asked to meet, but I wanted you to have this invitation. Your cousin Alexander is getting married in June." I took the envelope, noting the formal calligraphy of my name. "Does Dad know you're giving me this?" "It was his idea," she replied, surprising me again. "He's not ready to have this conversation himself, but he agreed that family events shouldn't continue with this divide." "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked carefully. "That we pretend the last 2 years never happened? That I show up at family gatherings and everyone acts normal?" "I'm not proposing anything so simple," she said. "What happened between us can't be erased. But perhaps we can find a way forward that acknowledges both your choices and our continuing connection as family." We talked for nearly 2 hours, navigating difficult topics with caution and occasional retreats into safer conversational territory. My mother didn't offer the full apology I might have wanted, but she did acknowledge that their reaction had been disproportionate to my decision to change careers. She expressed qualified admiration for what I'd accomplished professionally, though I could tell she still didn't fully understand my passion for photography. When I asked about my father, her expression tightened. "He's struggling," she admitted. "His pride makes it difficult for him to reconsider once he's taken a position. But seeing your success has affected him, even if he won't say it directly." As our meeting concluded, we established tentative parameters for moving forward. Occasional family gatherings with advance notice, no pressure about career choices, and a moratorium on discussing the law firm unless I initiated the topic. It wasn't the complete healing I might have imagined in my most optimistic moments, but it was a starting point grounded in reality rather than fantasy. "Will you come to the wedding?" she asked, as we prepared to leave. "I'll think about it," I promised, knowing the decision would require careful consideration of my own emotional boundaries. In the months that followed, I maintained my independence while cautiously rebuilding connections with extended family. My cousin Alexander's wedding provided a structured opportunity to re-enter family spaces without the intensity of smaller gatherings. My father and I exchanged formal greetings but no substantial conversation, a détente rather than reconciliation, but progress nonetheless. The Disowned series continued to open doors professionally, culminating in a publishing contract for a book, combining the portraits with personal essays from each subject about their journey through family estrangement. The project expanded my platform further, leading to speaking engagements about family dynamics, authenticity, and the cost of living by others' expectations. By the second anniversary of my departure from the law firm, I had achieved a level of professional recognition that even my achievement-oriented parents couldn't dismiss. My work had been featured in major publications, my studio had a 6-month waiting list for portrait commissions, and my teaching program had expanded to multiple locations throughout the city. More meaningful than the external markers of success was the internal peace I'd found. The desperate need for parental approval that had driven so many of my early choices had transformed into something healthier, an appreciation for their perspective without being controlled by it. I could engage with family on my own terms rather than losing myself in their expectations. For the final exhibition of the Disowned series, I created a companion collection titled Chosen Family. The new portraits captured the support networks my subjects had built after family rejection, friends, mentors, partners, and community members who had provided the acceptance their biological families withheld. My self-portrait for this collection featured Rachel, Diana, and several students from my workshop gathered in my studio, surrounded by the tools and evidence of my chosen path. The image captured not just what I had lost, but what I had gained, a community that valued me for exactly who I was. At the opening reception, I was surprised to receive a text from my mother asking if she could attend. When she arrived, she came alone. My father still unable or unwilling to publicly support my photography career, but her presence represented a meaningful step. She moved slowly through the gallery, studying each portrait with careful attention before finally stopping before my self-portrait with my chosen family. "You've built something remarkable," she said quietly. "Not what we would have chosen for you, but valuable in its own right." It wasn't unconditional acceptance. It wasn't the enthusiastic support I'd once craved, but it was honest acknowledgement of my path and its worth, perhaps the most authentic connection we'd ever shared. As I looked around the gallery at the gathered crowd, clients, students, fellow artists, friends, and yes, even family, I realized that the rejection that had once devastated me had ultimately freed me to create a life of genuine meaning and connection. The path hadn't been easy. The wounds hadn't healed perfectly. The relationship with my parents remained complicated and probably always would. But I had discovered something essential through the journey: the ability to define my own worth apart from family expectations or approval. I had learned to belong to myself first, perhaps the most valuable legacy I could create. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own authentic path? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this continuing journey. And remember, Sometimes the family we build matters more than the family we're born into. Thank you for being part of my chosen family here. Until next time, keep finding your authentic voice.